Justice survived powerless until power tried to look like her, a voice that never sat on the throne. In our world, it's always the powerful who speak, and those who seek justice, they fall silent, are exiled, or sentenced to death. Justice never sat on the throne, not because she refused, but because power never understood her language. Justice doesn't stab, justice doesn't advertise, justice doesn't fight for votes, justice doesn't gather crowds, and maybe that's why she always lost on the stage, but always won in the hearts. Justice is born in places where no one believes the morning will come, in dark cells, in silent exiles, in letters that never reached their destination, and in throats that swallowed their scream because they didn't want another person to be killed. Part 1. Powerless justice, yet alive. We often see justice as a system. Courts, laws, police, verdicts, constitutions. But those are instruments of power, not justice itself. Justice goes beyond systems. Justice is the moment someone is willing to lose for the sake of truth. Justice appears when a person says something against their own interest, simply because they refuse to lie, even if the lie has become universal. In ancient Athens, justice had no sword. She only had a man named Socrates, who asked questions. His crime was inquiry, asking what is good, questioning whether the majority is always right, challenging whether those in power are truly wise. His trial was the embodiment of a great contradiction: justice on trial in the name of law, death sentence in the name of public order, the killing of thought in the name of stability. Socrates could have escaped. His friends prepared everything. But he said, "If we abandon justice in its moment of danger, then when will we ever stand beside it?" And so, justice remained in that cup of hemlock, not as a victor, but as the most undeniable loser in history. Spinoza, Justice in Silence. 1,000 years later, in a quiet corner of Amsterdam, another man stood alone. He didn't raise a sword. He didn't build a courtroom. He simply wrote. He wrote, "A man is free when he can think without fear." But that one sentence was enough to have him expelled from his religion, isolated by his society, and censored by governments. Spinoza sought justice not in the law, but in the freedom to think. And he never betrayed that pursuit, even when living in solitude, even when no publisher dared touch his work. Power has always feared honesty, and justice is nothing if not honesty. Justice is not what echoes through speakers. Justice is often voiceless, but weighty. It lives in people's hearts, in silent suffering, in resistance without slogans, in anger without violence. Justice may always be powerless, but her powerlessness is exactly what separates her from those who rule. Part 2. When power realized it needed the face of justice. Justice remained powerless for centuries, in the shadows, in banned books, in midnight confessions, in sealed lips. But power, despite its posturing, is always afraid. And there's one thing it has always feared: its own reflection in the mirror of justice. Power realized it couldn't rule by force forever. Force is expensive, unsustainable. It breeds revolt. So it found a smarter path. It began to imitate justice, not because it believed in it, but because it knew the people would no longer accept naked domination. Fabricated justice, the creation of a replica. To survive, power dressed itself in justice. It built courts, it wrote laws, it wore the mask of transparency, and for the first time in history, it called itself the representative of justice. But if justice is only written and not seen, only spoken and not felt, only displayed and not lived, then it is emptied of all meaning. Power kept justice alive, but within forms it had crafted, a justice always aligned with law, but rarely with conscience. A justice that is fast, but never stops to ask, is this right? A justice that is transparent, but never reveals the truth. A justice performed in polished halls, but deaf to the voices on the street. The statue of justice, blindfolded or blind. Power even redesigned the face of justice, scales in one hand, a sword in the other, and a blindfold over her eyes. But that blindfold no longer symbolizes neutrality. It symbolizes blindness. Justice had become so detached from her roots, she no longer knew what she was ruling over. The theft of justice, glorifying the surface, burying the soul. In modern systems, justice is often nothing more than a tool of legitimacy. Today's powers no longer kill justice, they appropriate her. Justice is no longer the lonely rebel, she's part of the set design of authority. Painted on courtroom walls, quoted in speeches, but in practice, still the same outcast, only now with a cleaner uniform. Real justice was silenced once again, not by a dagger, not by a prison, but by a counterfeit version of herself. What is carried out in the name of justice today is often management of order, not the pursuit of truth, and power remains the master of turning ideals into instruments. Part 3. Justice must become powerless again, to speak the truth again. When justice became the official image of power, there was no longer a need for the voices of justice seekers, but those voices never truly fell silent, they simply stopped being seen. Justice always survives in the margins, in the voice of a mother asking, "Where is my child?" In a refugee who runs not for gain but for survival, in a worker who speaks of their rights and gets fired, in a writer who tells the truth and is rewarded with censorship, not praise. Justice does not live in loud slogans. It lives in quiet persistence. True justice does not return to power. If justice returns to power, it will be distorted again, because power always wants justice in a cage. In a definition it wrote, in a statue it sculpted, in a court it built. So maybe justice should never seek power again. Maybe it must remain powerless, but awake, like a conscience that lives inside hearts, so that whenever power tries to bury the truth, a voice will rise, even if faint, even if fragile. Justice returns through people, not systems. If justice is to return, it won't come from parliaments, from decrees, or from campaign promises. Justice is born again in people, in a simple conversation between two strangers, in a respect that needs no written rule, in help that expects nothing in return, in judgment that pauses just long enough to listen. Justice means being seen even when you have no status. Justice means being heard even when you have no title. Justice means staying human even when your voice is silenced. Final words. Justice is not meant to win. She is not here to wear a crown. She is here to survive. So that each time power declares, "I am justice," someone will still dare to ask, "If you are justice, why do you fear the powerless?"